The entire classroom fell silent the moment the chalk hit the floor, because the janitor, yes, the janitor, had just written the answer to a math equation that even world-class scholars couldn't solve. And the professor, who once joked, "Solve this equation and I'll marry you," suddenly went pale. Why? Because the joke was no longer a joke. Dr. Evelyn Carter was more than a professor. She was a storm of brilliance wrapped in calm confidence. Her reputation stretched across the university like a legend whispered in hallways. Students claimed she could solve equations that even supercomputers struggled with. Some believed she dreamt in numbers. Others said she once corrected a visiting Nobel laureate's calculation in front of an entire auditorium. Her mind was sharp, fearless, unmatched. That morning, the air in her lecture hall buzzed with electric excitement. Students leaned forward in anticipation, notebooks open, pens ready, eyes sparkling. Today she had promised something unforgettable. With deliberate steps, she moved to the board and raised a piece of chalk. Her smile was daring, almost mischievous. Then she unleashed it, the Carter conjecture. A monstrous equation twisted across the board like an ancient riddle carved into stone. Symbols stacked on symbols. Greek letters clashed with impossible operators. Students blinked in disbelief. A few jaws dropped. "This, Doctor," Carter announced, "is the unsolvable riddle of my career. Solve it." She paused dramatically, letting suspense thicken the air. "And I'll marry you myself." The classroom erupted in laughter. She laughed too, clearly teasing, fully confident no one could touch her intellectual throne. "Don't worry," she added, flipping her hair playfully. "Your hearts are safe. No one on this planet has cracked it, not even me." Students attacked the problem with enthusiasm, flipping pages, drawing diagrams, scribbling furiously. But as frustration spread, one quiet figure in the back of the room glanced at the board. Not a student, not a scholar, but the janitor, Alan, sweeping silently, invisible to everyone. Yet his eyes lingered on the equation with a strange familiarity. As minutes crawled by, the atmosphere shifted from excitement to desperation. Students huddled over their notebooks, sweat forming on their foreheads, their minds wrestling against the monstrous puzzle. Every attempt ended in a dead end. Every path seemed to twist back on itself. Dr. Carter walked between desks, amused, her confidence glowing brighter with each failed solution. "Don't feel bad," she teased. "Even the greatest minds in mathematics couldn't crack this." Students groaned, some rubbing their temples, others staring blankly at the board as if it were mocking them. The room felt heavier, more silent. The ticking clock grew louder, but in the back corner a broom stopped mid-sweep. Alan, the janitor, ordinary gray uniform wore, now shoes, soft presence, stood frozen, eyes fixed intently on the complex symbols swirling across the board. There was focus in his gaze, a deep, intense concentration that didn't match the mop bucket beside him. "Doctor?" Carter noticed the stillness. She raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" Alan quickly shook his head. "No, ma'am, just looking." Some students snickered. "He probably thinks it's some kind of cleaning code." "Yeah, right. Maybe he can solve it with a mop." Whispered jokes rolled through the room. Alan pretended not to hear, but he heard every word. Yet his eyes stayed on the equation. A spark flickered within them. Something sharp, something knowing, something he had buried long ago. "Doctor?" Carter dismissed it and returned to her amused stroll. But something about Alan's stillness lingered in her mind, unsettling like a shadow that didn't match its owner. As the lecture neared its end and hopelessness covered the room, "Doctor?" Carter clapped her hands cheerfully. "Time's up," and as expected, still undefeated. Students groaned, defeated, backpacks zipped, chairs scraped against the floor, but just as Dr. Carter reached for the board eraser, a soft, hesitant voice broke the silence. "Ma'am, could I try?" Dr. Carter turned. The student stopped mid-step. Standing timidly, broom in hand, was Alan, the janitor, A ripple of disbelief spread across the room. "You want to try to solve this, Doctor?" Carter asked. Alan swallowed hard. "If you don't mind, I just want to see if I'm thinking right." Laughter exploded. "This is going to be good. Bro's about to sweep the equation clean." "Doctor," Carter lifted a hand, silencing them. Something in Alan's eyes stopped her from dismissing him. Curiosity tugged at her. "All right," she said gently. "Go ahead." Alan stepped forward like a man walking toward destiny. He picked up the chalk with trembling fingers. For a moment, he stared at the board, perfectly still. Then his hand moved, fast, precise, purposeful. The room fell into absolute silence. He broke down the problem with elegance, rewriting symbols, flipping variables, finding invisible patterns that no one else could see. It wasn't guessing, it wasn't luck, it was mastery. 5 minutes passed, 10, the chalk danced. Students leaned in breathless. Doctor, Carter's eyes widened, shock filling her chest. And finally, Alan circled a clean, flawless solution. The impossible solution. The room froze. "Doctor," Carter's heartbeat thundered. Her lips parted. "You solved it." The classroom erupted, not in cheers but stunned whispers. Students stared at Alan as if he had just rewritten the laws of reality. "Doctor," Carter approached the board slowly, her eyes tracing every line of his work. Each step was elegant, logical, brilliant. There were no mistakes. Not a single flaw. It was the kind of solution only a master mathematician could produce. "Who are you?" she breathed. Alan stood awkwardly, rubbing the back of his neck. "I used to work in research." "Math research, long time ago." Students froze. "Doctor," Carter blinked. "You were a researcher." Alan nodded, eyes clouding with old pain. "I published a few papers, worked with some teams, but life got complicated. My family needed money, I needed steady work. So I stopped everything, took this job. It was simple, quiet. No pressure. The room was silent. Every student who mocked him now stared in shame, realizing they had laughed at a hidden genius. "Doctor," Carter felt her throat tighten, "you didn't just see a pattern. You cracked a mathematical wall the academic world couldn't break. Do you understand what this means?" Alan shrugged softly. "It means I still remember a few things." A few students snorted in disbelief. "FEW things, sir? You just solved the math version of a sleeping dragon." Then a voice shouted jokingly from the back, "Professor, he solved it. You said you'd marry whoever solved it." Laughter erupted again, but this time it had a nervous edge. "Doctor," Carter blushed deep red. Alan nearly tripped over his broom, but the joke wouldn't die. "A promise is a promise," another teased, but for the first time. Dr. Carter didn't shut it down immediately. By the next morning, Alan wasn't just a janitor. He was a campus legend. Articles spread. Students whispered in awe. The janitor solved the unsolvable doctor. Carter was defeated the marriage bet. Everywhere Alan went, eyes followed. Interviews were requested. Professors wanted to meet him. The dean called him to the office. And in the midst of it all, Alan stood quietly, overwhelmed but humble. But the most surprising moment happened outside the math building, where Dr. Carter waited for him holding 2 cups of coffee. "For you," she said softly, "a small thank you." Alan accepted with a shy smile. "You don't have to, I want to," she interrupted. Her voice was warm, strangely nervous. "I also want to apologize. I treated the problem as a joke. I treated you like you couldn't understand it. That was unfair." Alan shook his head. "You were just teaching. No need to feel bad." "I do," she insisted, "because you're brilliant and because your talent deserves a place here." She took a slow breath. "I want to offer you a position, a real one, as a research assistant. If you want it." Alan's eyes glistened. I'd love that." Students walking by gasped, whispering to each other. But Dr. Carter wasn't done. She took one small step closer. "And about that marriage joke?" Alan froze. Dr. Carter laughed nervously. "No, I'm not saying we run to the courthouse, but maybe we could start with dinner." The campus buzzed with excitement as they walked away together, because sometimes the greatest stories begin where no one looks, in the quiet corner of a classroom, with a janitor holding a broom and a genius waiting to be rediscovered.